And Reb Nosson is going to continue expounding on various halachos of Shabbos and how they interact, how they intersect with the lesson that we learned most of from Rabbi Nachman. And some of these halachos may be familiar to people. Some of them may be new. We'll do our best to explain them as we have it. Welcome back. So Reb Nosson says, "V'zeh bechinas arba mechitzos shel reshus hayachid." This is the idea of the four walls that comprise a private domain. Shehem sholosh mechitzos da'oraisa. In order to have a private domain, one need only have actually three walls. And the fourth side can be open and still considered a private domain. The Chachamim tiknu lechi v'kora l'ruach revius. But the Chachamim established that there should be a lechi and a korah, a vertical and a horizontal beam to border that fourth wall, that fourth side, the open fourth side. Ki arba mechitzos shel reshus hayachid. Because, and why did they do that? So that people should know that that's the end of the Reshus HaYachid, and they shouldn't carry beyond that demarcation. Ki arba mechitzos shel Reshus HaYachid, because the four walls of the Reshus HaYachid, hein keneged arba osios Hashem. They are representative of the four letters of Hashem's name. Yud K, Vav K. Just like there are four letters of Hashem's name. So we're learning here that those four letters are represented by the four walls that delineate a private domain. What Reb Nosson does with this is absolutely beautiful. The Ikar Hashem, hu b'chinas sholosh osios. However, the main name of Hashem is comprised of only three distinct letters. You have a Yud, you have a Hey, and then you have a Vav. The final Hey is a repeat of the original Hey, the second letter. But as far as unique characters, there are three unique characters in Hashem's name, Yud K, Vav K. And he says, Ki os revius hi kafula, because the fourth letter, which is the Hey, is double. Meaning it's the second time we see that letter. V'hi b'chinas emuna ki yedua. And this Hey represents emuna, as is known in the Sifrei Kabbalah and Sifrei Hasidus, as Reb Nosson Maimon is fond of saying in that fashion. So, why is the Hey representative of Emunah, faith, Emunah? Because the Yud represents Chachma, the Hey, the initial Hey represents Bina, the Vav represents Chesed Gevurah Tiferes Nesach Hod Yesod, the six spheros of the Zeir Anpin, flowing down from the upper three, which are the Mochin. And the last sphere, the lowest sphere of Malchus, is represented by the final Hey in the name Yud, in Hashem's name Yud K Vav K. And in this world, we don't see Hashem. In this world of Malchus, in this realm of Malchus, it's up to us to be Mamlech Hashem, but we don't readily see Hashem in the world. This is a world that's premised on Emunah, at least for right now, until Mashiach comes. And then it'll be so obvious to everyone that there'll be no more need for Emunah. But right now, and throughout the course of history till now, the final sphere of Malchus, which is this world, is a world of Emunah. one who wants to experience Hashem in his or her life must have emunah. V'hi bechinas Pesach. And it's got the idea, it's the concept of an opening, like the open third wall, because if we've got three unique characters in Hashem's name, well, each one of those three unique letters, the Yud, the first Hey, and the Vav, represent the three walls that biblically separate one area as a Rishus HaYachid, as a private domain, meaning leaving the fourth wall open, because that's a repeat letter. Technically speaking, it doesn't even have to be closed, so we just have to demarcate it with a vertical and a horizontal beam on the side and on the top. But for all intents and purposes, it's a concept of something being open, physically and metaphorically. So V'hi bechinas Pesach, it's the idea of an opening, a doorway, bechinas Pischu li Sharei Tzedek, the same along the same lines as open for me gates of righteousness, Kiyadua. Now, why is this fourth open wall correlated to the notion of open for me the gates of righteousness? So we'll be explaining that as we go along. Visham hamachitza pesucha, and it's from there that the wall is open. Kedei sheyuchlo kulam mekanes el hakdusha, in order that every person should have the ability to enter into the realm of kedusha. Because if the walls of kedusha, which are synonymous in our lesson with the Rishus HaYachid, were totally surrounded like a fortress by high impregnable walls, then no one who wasn't already in that framework, in that region, in that area, would be able to enter. And what Hashem wants is for everyone to be able to enter this holy zone, this holy area, this area of Kedusha. So Hashem has it designed that the fourth wall can be missing and is open and represents the idea of a doorway. In order so that we should take advantage of a doorway and go through it and allow ourselves and bring ourselves through the doorway into the realm of holiness. So just as a quick thought about that, too often a person may think that they're precluded from improving their spiritual status or working on things and becoming closer to Hashem, either because of what they may have done in the past or what they believe in their heart, or maybe because they're feeling sad about it, or they're feeling, even if they're feeling lazy about it, they may feel for one reason or another that there's no way for them to become closer to Hashem, to gain closer levels of Kedusha. And what we're learning here right now is that that's not true. That the doorway to the realm of Kedusha, to holiness, is open. And every person, no matter who they are, has the ability to decide on whatever level they're at and with whatever tools they have currently available. But they can decide, I want to go into that zone, I want to get into that private domain of Hashem known as Kedusha, as holiness. And many times just knowing that a person is not out of the running, is not knocked out of contention, is enough to sustain a person's motivation or get it started and give them the encouragement they need to try and to grow. And as they do that, they will indeed right away enter a higher level of Kedusha. Right away. It may be imperceptible to them at that very moment, but if a person continues to work, they will look back after not a very long time and say, I have grown. I have been able to change certain things in my own makeup. Things don't happen overnight as an absolute. Meaning, if someone has to rid themselves out of bad character traits, whether it's anger or whether it's stinginess or whether it's a lack of chesed, granted, these things take time. However, as soon as a person makes up his mind or her mind that they want to improve, they turn around and they enter Hashem's realm of Kedusha. And now it's a question of how far they can get. And as a person continues to work, they will get further and further and further. But as soon as they make that decision that they would like to be in that realm, they turn around. Instead of facing one direction, now they're facing into the realm of Kedusha, and that's where they are. Granted, again, the job isn't done. They've got plenty of work to do. So do the great tzaddikim have, on their level, plenty of work to do. We're all here to work. But that fourth entrance into the private domain of Hashem's Kedusha is open to all. Kol mi shirotze lekanes l'rishus yichido shel olam. Anyone who wants to enter into the private domain of the unique one of the universe, the Yechido Shel Olam, meaning Hashem, ulehikalel b'kedusha, and to be subsumed, to be enveloped in holiness, yochol lekanes alidei emunah. A person's able to do that, to enter into that zone through emunah. Shehi hapesach lichnos ulehiskarev elav. Because that fourth opening, we said, represents Emunah. Because we said that fourth opening represents the sphere of Malchus, and Hashem's existence is not readily apparent in our world. So by definition, it represents Emunah. So if the fourth wall represents Emunah, the way to get through that opening is with Emunah. Use the Emunah that comprises that fourth side, the opening, to actually get through that opening. Uli hiskara they love Yisbarach, and to get closer and closer to Hashem Yisbarach. I hope this is coming out clearly, that the fourth wall is Malchus, the Hey, the second Hey, the last letter of Yud Kei Vav Kei, represents Malchus. The whole idea of a realm, the sphere of Malchus, is Emunah. And now Reb Nosson is telling us that door can be open, and still it's a Reshus HaYachid, meaning still it's a private domain. In our case, we're saying it's the Yud Kei Vav of Hashem's name that creates the private domain, meaning Hashem's private domain of Kedusha. And the way to enter into that fourth wall is through Emunah. That's like the Shar Emunah, the gate of Emunah. And you have to have a level of Emunah in order to go through the gate. That's the entrance fee. Granted, again, everybody's level of Emunah is different. But on whatever level of Emunah that a person has, they will be able to get closer and closer inside that gate, inside that area. Yalkain, and therefore, Mechitzur v'yes Pesucha, the fourth side is open. Aval Chachamim tiknu lechet v'korah. But the Chachamim established that we need to delineate that fourth side. Now we're talking in a physical sense. So you have a private domain surrounded by 3 walls and open on the 4th. Of course, we require some sort of demonstrative so that people will know that it's not just going on forever, that there's an end to the private domain, and beyond that mark is the public domain. And the Chachamim established we should put a board, a vertical board and a horizontal board as an indicator. Mishum Heker, and they did this so that there should be some demonstrative indicator to all. Mishum Heker as an indicator, Lebal Yizkarev Zar, in order that a stranger should not draw near. Shelo lechal Shabbos Kodesh al yidei ha'pu'ulos mishtanos, in order that that person should not desecrate the Shabbos through doing the many different kinds of activities that are otherwise prohibited on Shabbos. Shelo lahotzi mirshus harabim l'rishus yachid, in order that he shouldn't be able to take out or transfer from the public domain into the private domain. Ki hachachamim, I'll explain this in a minute. Ki hachachamim, because the chachamim, hainu Torah sheba'al peh, and that's synonymous with Torah sheba'al peh, hein bechinas emunah, are the concept of emunah. Bechinas Shabbos, which is a concept of Shabbos, and you need to guard your emunah in order that there should not come close to it any stranger. So what does all of this mean? I'm stopping almost like in the middle of a sentence just at the moment, just to be able to explain it. So what Reb Nosson is saying is, we have, physically speaking, 3 walls and an opening. We have to put some sort of recognition that that's the end of the private domain and not to carry any further, because you'll be going into the public domain. Now he's adding a component that we want to put that indicator on the wall, on the 4th open side, in order not for the people on the inside that they should not only for the people on the inside that they shouldn't go out, but also for the people on the outside that they should be prohibited and prevented from coming in, because it's as much of an aveira to transfer from inside to outside as it is. I mean, it's still as much of an aveira to transfer from outside to inside as it is to transfer from inside to outside. Either direction, it's the same aveira. So just as well as that indicator indicates for the people on the inside that they shouldn't carry to the outside, now Reb Nosson is saying that the indicator marks that the people on the outside should not be allowed to come inside while they're carrying. Now, he's also talking very, very spiritually and abstractly, because we're not only talking about transferring an object from the outside to the inside, but rather we're talking about a zar, a stranger. Now, we're not talking about not having a guest, and we're not talking about someone who's, for example, not Jewish, walking into that area. What we're talking about here on a metaphysical level is the idea that we don't want someone bringing in the weekday activities into the holiness of Shabbos. We don't want someone introducing the 39 prohibited activities, the malachos, the lamites malachos. We don't want somebody doing those kinds of activities on Shabbos. That would be akin to some stranger from the outside coming into the private domain, meaning he's coming in with his bag of tricks, with his activities, which we don't want to enter into our realm of Kedusha on Shabbos, into our realm where we're not doing those activities on Shabbos. Additionally, what Reb Nosson is saying is that this is the gate of Emunah, as we've already explained a couple of times. we don't want anybody who lacks emunah to be able to come through that doorway. Now, when I say that, I don't mean a fellow Jew who's looking or to become close to Hashem. We're talking about someone perhaps who would otherwise, God forbid, deny the existence of Hashem, and that kind of person, someone who would just be coming to mock and make fun. But we're not really talking about in the practical, physical sense of this. What we're saying, what Nassim is saying is, you have a private zone of Kedusha within you right now. And that zone of Kedusha is bordered on three sides. And it's open on one side. That's the side that's permeable to be affected by external forces. Call them thoughts, call them influences from our culture, etc. And what Reb Nassim is telling us is one must put up an indicator to say, I am not going to allow these external forces to put a dent in my emunah. So we're talking on very many levels here. On the one level, we could be talking about not letting somebody in. You know, if somebody's keeping Shabbos, you wouldn't want a person coming over to your home and someone who is irreverent and is not keeping Shabbos, and thereby turns on and off all the lights, and he plays loud music, and he's making phone calls, and he's doing this, that, and the other thing. You may choose to not have that person on a Shabbos. You may choose to have that person perhaps during the week if it's important. But you wouldn't necessarily want that kind of a person if he's choosing not to be respectful. I'm not talking about doing kiruv, obviously, because there could be exceptions. But let's say, for example, the person is denying the validity of Shabbos. They're doing it just to do it. You know, so that kind of a person we wouldn't want in our homes, specifically on Shabbos. Right? That's one level. The other level is, excuse me, we're keeping out distracting and discouraging thoughts that negatively impact our emunah. And it's okay to do this. A person does not always have to leave themselves exposed to a perpetual and ongoing onslaught of negative thoughts and anti-emunah sentiment. You know, it's not. There's no claim to greater sincerity because someone exposes themselves to people who don't believe in Hashem. There's no intellectual honesty with that. So to that extent, a person should be selective about what kind of messages that you allow into your zone of kedusha. Just like we put up that lechi and that korah to demonstrate, you know what? I'm not letting the kedusha out of my kedusha zone, and I'm also not letting the shmutz into my kedusha zone. I am going to be discerning about what I will allow to come into my mind and heart. This is not easy, but again, it's very worthwhile to work on and to be aware of. Oh, and one other thing we mentioned is the idea that this is represented by the idea that someone is coming into the private domain where Shabbos is being observed and bringing into that Shabbos environment and that Shabbos time frame the weekly activities of the Lamed Tes Malachos. This is how Reb Nassim correlates the lesson that we learned in Likutei Moharan to the Hilchos Shabbos. Because it's impossible to introduce something from the public domain to the private domain Ki'im be'erev Shabbos, except Erev Shabbos, meaning before Shabbos. When is the time to prepare for Shabbos? When is the time to take care of all of the essential cooking and preparation and cleaning and washing one's clothing and transferring and everything else? Before Shabbos. Either within the week before Shabbos or even Erev Shabbos, right before Shabbos, Friday afternoon. Because it's impossible to do a transfer from the Rishus Harabim, from the public domain to the private domain, except for Erev Shabbos, before Shabbos, while it's still within the framework of the 6 days of the week. That's when it's permissible to bring in what you need for Shabbos. Al Yedei Hakdusha Shel Shabbos Shemamshichim B'mei HaChol, through the kedusha of Shabbos, which is being drawn from the weekday. So remember, in our Likutei Moharan, when we were learning it, we were saying that Shabbos is not static. It's not relegated only to one day of the week, and that a person is able to utilize the Shabbos experience not only to elevate the previous week, but to influence the following week. And that's what he's saying here, that this, how can I bring something from the public domain to the private domain? How do I bring something from the mundane into the holy? Because there's always a strong connection between the two zones, the public and the private, the holy, the non-holy, the weekday and the Shabbos. There is always a connection between those two, especially during the weekday, when the weekday is being influenced in a positive way by the holiness of Shabbos. Then it's permissible to bring into your Kedusha zone, I made up that phrase, but I think it works to some extent. Then it's possible to bring into your Kedusha zone only these different things. Why? Because by bringing the Shabbos into the weekday and then using the weekday to bring more into your Shabbos, you're picking out during the weekday all the Kedusha that the weekday has to offer. So it's like a natural progression that you keep one Shabbos properly, as we said, with the right dibur and the right everything, as we learned in the lesson, and then that positively influences the week. And as you're going through your week and you're preparing for the following Shabbos, for the upcoming Shabbos, the power of the previous Shabbos will enhance your ability to make qualitatively good decisions about what you want to let into your Kedusha zone for the following week. And so in a certain sense, one week builds on the other. But that kind of activity only takes place during the week. Once that next Shabbos comes along, no more transfer. Then everything, this process shuts down for the time being. On Shabbos, it's prohibited to do any action of transferring from the public to the private. Because it says in the pasuk in the Torah that someone who profanes, who desecrates the Shabbos, he will surely be put to death. God forbid. But that demonstrates and underscores the severe importance of being as familiar as possible with Hilchos Shabbos and making our best effort to abide by them. Man da'ayal zar b'chal dilah, someone who brings in a zar into that space. So again, what that means is, what kind of a person gets punished for desecrating the Shabbos? That's the kind of person who is introducing into the Shabbos time that which doesn't belong there, that which is comprised of the 39 malachos. That's the czar, the stranger, so to speak. And therefore, Chachamim Daika, the Chachamim specifically, Shein Bechinas Torah Sheba'al Peh, Bechinas Emunah, and the Chachamim who represent Torah Sheba'al Peh and represent Emunah, Heim Daika is Chanu HaKerah L'Ruach HaRevius. They specifically required some sort of indicator on that fourth wall. So let me explain what this means, if you're not already familiar. We have two aspects of Torah in this world. One is the written Torah, Torah Shebiksav, and one is the oral Torah, Torah Sheba'al Peh. If somebody were to ask you, which do you think is the main Torah? Which do you think is the most, in a sense, the more important Torah? I bet you most people would say the written Torah. After all, it was written by Moshe Rabbeinu. It was given to him by Hashem, either in part or dictated, either given in part directly, like the Aseres HaDibros, or dictated to Moshe Rabbeinu for him to transcribe into the Torah. For the most part, there's other parts that's machlokas at the very end, whether it was written by Yoshua or maybe Moshe Rabbeinu himself wrote it. But the bottom line is, my guess is that most people would say, when asked which is the most important Torah, they would say the Torah Shebiksav. But the reality is that that's not the case. The reality is, if somebody tried to live a Torah life with only Torah Shebiksav, they would wind up doing many, many things incorrectly and fall far, far away from the mark that they were shooting for. So in reality, the Torah Sheba'al Peh is what makes the Torah Shebiksav what it truly is. And without the Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah, the Torah Shebiksav is, for all intents and purposes, on a halachic standpoint, incomprehensible. As a result of that, the Torah Sheba'al Peh is actually the more important, because when we need to know halacha, we don't open up a Chumash. We open up a Shulchan Aruch. We open up a Gemara. We open up a Mishnah Berurah or some other halacha sefer. This is all based on Torah Sheba'al Peh, the oral Torah. And the oral Torah is just that. Nowadays, it's written down. It has been written down for quite some time. But prior to it being transcribed and canonized or closed, it was more of a dynamic work. There were some Masechtos that once existed that no longer exist. Some Masechtos that were larger in volume, like the Maseches Avodah Zarah, was much, much larger at the times of the Beis Hamikdash, where Avodah Zarah was such an pervasive and important topic. Excuse me, there were many more discussions and halachos with regard to that topic than there are today. So some of those editions of Avodah Zarah have fallen away from us. We no longer have, per se. But the point is that this world is a world of emunah, because we live in Malchus, where we don't see Hashem. It's also since it's the sphere of Malchus, we know that the sphere is very tightly related to the action, or it's not technically an action, but the activity of speech. A king rules by his speech. He issues a decree. He issues proclamations. This is his. I don't think that in olden times that kings would text their subjects. I think that would be not befitting of royalty. They would issue proclamations, they would issue decrees, and for the most part, they would be verbal, at least to the subjects that were around them. Even if they transcribed them later and disseminated them, they would be initially said verbally. So the point being that Malchus, the sphere of Malchus, is correlated to the koach hadibur, to the power of speech. Now you'll see the connection. Power of speech, sphere of malchus, Torah Shabbat Peh, Emunah. Emunah's chachamim, faith and belief in our chachamim. The Torah says you should write them on the doorpost of your house. How do I do this? Do I take a spray can? Do I take out my pen? What do I do? Well, the chachamim tell us that we write it on parchment. They tell us what to write on the parchment and how to hang it on the doorpost, and which doorposts require the mezuzah, etc. And we have faith in our chachamim that this is what the Torah wants from us. So we see that Torah Shabbat Peh is dependent on emunah in Hashem and emunah in chachamim. And that's what we just said. The Alkein HaChachamim Daika, the Chachamim specifically, why the Chachamim, we're like in the middle of a sentence here. Why the Chachamim specifically what? Why do the end of the sentence is, why do the Chachamim, specifically the Chachamim, require that you put up this cross beam and this vertical beam? So he says, the Alkein HaChachamim Daika, therefore the Chachamim, specifically the Chachamim, Shehim Bechinas Torah Shabbat Peh, because they are the ones that represent Torah Shabbat Peh, Bechinas Emunah, and they are the ones that represent Emunah. First of all, they teach us Emunah. Second of all, we must have Emunah that they're teaching us the right things and leading us in the right way. Heim Daika Iskanu Hakera L'Ruach Revius. They, because they understand this Torah Shabbat Peh and this concept of Emunah, they specifically were the ones to decide and to institute that one must put these kinds of delineations on that fourth opening. Again, because we don't want anything coming into our realm of Kedusha, because that fourth wall is open. And it's up to us to guard it, and also to understand that the way for us to get through it as well is through Emunah. So the Chachamim who represent Emunah demonstrated or delineated the boundaries of that zone, of that opening. The Baal Yiskarev Zar, and they wanted an indicator on that opening in order that outsiders, and we've already explained that that means conceptually as well, should not be able to get close, should not be able to go through that opening. Only someone who exerts himself before Shabbos, either Erev Shabbos or before that, but someone who prepares is able to go through that doorway. Along the same lines, someone who is working on his or her emunah can also go through that doorway. But someone who, it's kind of like the expression, I just thought of this. I recently saw something, I was on the train and I saw somebody had a bag or something and it said on the bag, seeing is believing. Well, I've heard already from several different Rabbanim that seeing is not believing. Because if one sees something, one need not believe in it. I don't need to believe in something I see because I have the ability to clearly see it. It's only when I cannot see something, that it's imperceptible to me, that I need to have emunah. What we're saying here is that someone who wants to go through the gate, identified as the gate of emunah, and go through that gate into the zone of kedusha, the Rabbanu Shalom, must prepare beforehand by developing his emunah. Just like someone who wants to come into Shabbos must prepare before Shabbos in order for him to have the necessities that he needs for the day. Now again, I want to just qualify this by saying a person need not have impeccable emunah to go through the gate of emunah. We're all growing in our emunah, hopefully, and with whatever level of emunah you have, you can go through the gate that's right in front of you. And when you do, you will enter into a zone of Kedusha that you were not in previously. Again, this is all tailor-made, everyone according to his or her own level. But it's always readily available. The idea being one must be aware of these ideas and one must try to decide and make an effort to implement the ideas, whether it's preparing physically for Shabbos or whether it's preparing oneself to enter with Emunah. And this is what our rabbi said, Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak mechasef ba'ayam mechasef enafik be'erev Shabbos. So Rav Nachman is bringing here an example from the Gemara Shabbos that Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Rav Nachman the son of Yitzchak, would sling things on his shoulder and come in and sling things on his shoulder and go out. And he would do all of this back and forth Erev Shabbos, meaning he wouldn't do it obviously on Shabbos, but he did this as a form of preparing for Shabbos, all this kind of transferring. Because it's on Erev Shabbos specifically when a person has to transfer from the public to the private domains. That's how you prepare for Shabbos. Because it's specifically then, Erev Shabbos, during the weekday, that a person has the capacity to effectuate the different activities, the 39 malachos, and extract the kedusha that lie in the weekday and draw that into Shabbos. I translate it as draw it into Shabbos. Hakol the Rishus Hayachid. He's saying into the Rishus Hayachid, into the private domain, but we're saying the private domain in our context is synonymous with Shabbos. Ava b'Shabbos, he shvisa v'naicha. But on Shabbos, it's a time of rest. And that's not the time to do the work. If somebody didn't do it before then, better they should just get through the Shabbos without doing any malacha, without doing any of these activities, with whatever they have, even if it wouldn't be grand, even if it wouldn't be super wonderful. It's still better than violating one of these precepts by doing the prohibited activity. And therefore, you need an indicator that there should be no stranger coming close on Shabbos. And again, the beautiful part about this part of the lesson is how Reb Nosson masterfully intertwines the concrete subject of what you're permitted to do on Shabbos and the parameters of what makes a public and a private domain, and the rabbinic statutes of how to delineate those private domains from the public domains, how he interweaves this with the spiritual notion of of extricating the goodness of the week for use on Shabbos, as well as drawing a distinction between the public and the private domain vis-a-vis one's own emunah, vis-a-vis one's notion of kedusha. I remember when I was in yeshiva, there was always a big discussion whether one was permitted to read a newspaper on Shabbos. And I think the conclusion was that, for yeshiva guys, it wasn't the best thing in the whole world to do, but if somebody else were to be reading a newspaper on Shabbos, then that wasn't necessarily the worst thing in the world. But why was it even a discussion? That's what I wanted to point out. Why was it even a discussion? It was even a discussion because a newspaper represents the weekday. A newspaper represents what's going on in the world. This one's doing this, and this one's doing that. And even if somebody's not doing these activities himself on Shabbos, but a person who is really getting into reading an article in the newspaper could be immersing themselves in the idea of, yeah, this person's investing and this person's, building and this person's doing that. And gee whiz, I have to make an investment. And gee whiz, I want to start working on a project of my own. And this is a great idea. Let me remember that for after Shabbos, and on and on and on. So if a person has the ability, for example, it's not up for me to decide for each individual person, and I'm certainly not saying that someone who reads a newspaper on Shabbos is doing the wrong thing for that person. But to the extent that a person can refrain from immersing himself or herself in the ideas of the weekday and being selective about how one spends one Shabbos, then it's quite possible, I think it's very, very possible, that that person will have a very different kind of Shabbos experience. And obviously, if a person is used to reading the newspaper on Shabbos, I'm not saying that you have to stop. I'm not saying that, there's anything wrong with that. I personally don't read the newspaper on Shabbos. But the point being that to the extent that a person can refrain from these kinds of thoughts on Shabbos and draw a distinction. Today, I'm not going to think about the stock market. Today, I'm not going to see what's going on around me, who's doing what and why, and start thinking stuff, what do I need to do about it, etc. To the extent that a person can do that, you're putting up that boundary, just like the Chachamim talk about the Lechi and the Korah, and you're saying, you know what? This can wait. This can wait till Motzi Shabbos. It can wait till Sunday. I can catch up with my reading then. Maybe I have a different job on Shabbos. It's important to rest on Shabbos, and some people derive a tremendous amount of relaxation from reading the newspaper, and maybe there are even those sections of the newspaper that have nothing to do with investing or current events that will sometimes be upsetting if you read certain events, especially these days. So maybe those parts of the newspaper are just fine and in sync with the spirit of what we're learning here. But my point is that each person on his or her own level and speed and pace to just be aware and say, am I giving up something by my activity right now? Am I giving up access to a greater level of Kedusha on my Shabbos because of what I'm doing right now? And I think if we try to go through our Shabbos with that awareness, only in a positive sense, only in a nurturing positive sense, but I think that if we do that, you'll see that over the course of time, maybe not even all that much time, that your connection to Shabbos becomes more powerful and the experience more spiritual and more refreshing and renewing. And the in the strongest way. So I know it's only Tuesday, but I want to give everybody a bracha that they should continue the rest of their week trying to extract the goodness of the week and to prepare, even from today, for going into the Shabbos. We should have a good rest of the week and a wonderful, beautiful Shabbos. All of us. Thank you for joining me.